10 unknown people who wrote history. Their contributions altered the course of history and shaped the world we live in today, yet they remain largely unrecognized by the public. Let us introduce you to some individuals who had a significant impact on shaping our present. A group of key figures who have received far less recognition than they deserve. Could these be the most overlooked minds and actions that changed the direction of humanity? Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks is a truly remarkable figure in the history of medical science. Her contribution to biomedical research was profound and impactful, even though she didn't know what she was doing. Henrietta was a tobacco farmer in Virginia, a simple and humble woman who could hardly have imagined the enormous impact she would have on the world. In 1951, during a visit to Johns Hopkins Hospital for an illness, doctors took a tissue sample from her cervix. This seemingly routine procedure turned out to be a pivotal moment. The cells taken from Henrietta showed an extraordinary quality. They were immortal. Unlike normal cells that die after a period, these cells kept growing and reproducing indefinitely outside the body. Since then, the cells known as HeLa have played a critical role in numerous scientific breakthroughs. They have been used to study cancer, hemophilia, influenza, leukemia, Parkinson's disease, and many other illnesses. They were essential in developing the polio vaccine, anti-cancer drugs, chemotherapy techniques, and human genetic mapping, among other important achievements. Sadly, Henrietta passed away a few months later due to cervical cancer, never knowing the incredible gift her cells offered to humanity. She was buried without recognition for her invaluable contribution to saving millions of lives. It wasn't until 2010 that a proper headstone was placed at her grave, honoring this unsung hero of science. Grace Murray Hopper. Hopper lived from 1906 to 1992. She was an American military officer and scientist whose impact on computer science was both significant and largely unnoticed by the public. Known as Amazing Grace to her friends, Hopper developed the first compiler for a programming language, making her a trailblazer in computing. Essentially, she created the tool that allows programmers to turn code into software. Thanks in part to her work, we have the programs we use every day, often without realizing it. During a time when computers were seen as capable only of performing calculations and not running programs, Hopper figured out how to change that perception, leaving a lasting mark on the field of computing. She was also part of the team that created the COBOL programming language, one of the earliest languages designed for universal business management. Without her contributions, the world of computing would likely be very different today, given the crucial role that new technologies play in human development. Hopper could be considered one of the most underrated figures in history. Ignaz Philipp Semmelweis. Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician who pioneered antiseptic procedures that transformed medicine in his time and saved millions of lives worldwide. His most important discovery was that washing hands with chlorinated lime solutions during childbirth reduced mortality to less than 1%, a staggering 90% reduction. Basic practices like hygiene during childbirth, widely accepted today, were not common in his era. Semmelweis faced criticism from the scientific community because he couldn't provide a convincing scientific explanation for his findings. However, his theory gained widespread acceptance after his death, thanks to Louis Pasteur confirming the germ theory of disease and Joseph Lister successfully implementing Semmelweis's hygiene methods with great success. Claire Cameron Patterson. Patterson was an American geochemist known for accurately calculating the Earth's age at 4.55 billion years in 1956, a groundbreaking achievement. However, his most important, but less recognized contribution was discovering the toxicity of lead used in fuel additives. In 1965, Patterson published Contaminated and Natural Environments of Man, warning about rising lead levels in the environment and food chain due to human activities. He strongly opposed lead use in fuel production and faced persecution from corporations involved in lead processing and sales. His advocacy contributed to the passage of the U.S. Clean Air Act in 1970. In 1978, Patterson emphasized immediate pollution control measures, advocating for removing lead from gasoline, food containers, paints, enamels, and water systems. Many of these measures are now widely accepted, and modern fuels are lead-free, thanks to his efforts. Despite facing challenges from industries prioritizing profits over public health, Patterson's work was crucial. As humanity, we owe him at least a word of gratitude for his contributions. Alexi Ananenko, Valeri Bolov, and Boris Baronov. 10 days after the Chernobyl disaster, there was a grave risk of a much larger explosion than the initial one, which could have spread extremely high levels of uncontrolled radiation throughout Europe. The basement under the melted reactor was filled with water, and, if the reactor core material breached the concrete and mixed with the water, it would have caused a massive thermal explosion, spreading radioactive material across half of Europe, potentially causing millions of deaths and rendering much of the continent uninhabitable. 3 workers bravely volunteered to dive into these waters, fully aware of the deadly radiation levels, to locate and open the manual valve that would drain the water from the basement. Alexi Ananenko, Valeri Bolov, and Boris Baronov were their names. Their mission was a complete success, preventing what would have been the worst disaster in human history, as the reactor core material ultimately settled into a completely dry basement. Sadly, 2 weeks later, they died from radiation poisoning. Henry Dunnett. Dunnett was a man whose vision and determination changed history in a remarkable way. His name deserves recognition for the countless lives his legacy has saved. In 1859, during the Second Italian War of Independence, Dunnett witnessed the horrors of wounded soldiers left without medical care in the village of Solferino. This experience deeply affected him. Driven by compassion, Dunnett wrote a book titled A Memory of Solferino, describing the tragic scene and proposing a bold idea: that all nations should establish aid societies to care for war wounded and train volunteers to provide the best care possible. Dunnett went further, advocating that governments protect and grant safe passage to those caring for wounded soldiers, a revolutionary concept during wartime. At the time, he tirelessly traveled across Europe promoting his vision. His efforts paid off when, on August 22, 1864, 12 nations signed the First Geneva Convention. This agreement aimed to ensure the neutrality of medical personnel, facilitate supply for their work, and adopt a distinctive emblem, often a red cross on a white background. Thanks to Henry Dunnett, the world now has the Red Cross, a centuries-old institution that continues to provide humanitarian aid globally. Dunnett was awarded the very first Nobel Peace Prize in 1901. However, he spent his final days living humbly, in obscurity, somewhere in the world. Witold Peli. Now let me introduce you to a man whose bravery and daring rival the most thrilling spy novels. He was a true secret agent who risked his life on one of the most dangerous missions. In 1940, when rumors of atrocities at Auschwitz began to circulate, Peli didn't hesitate to volunteer to infiltrate that hellish place. He intentionally allowed himself to be captured by the Nazis, with the sole purpose of gathering information from within and transmitting it to the Allies. Once inside, this fearless Pole crafted a makeshift radio transmitter with smuggled parts and began sending secret reports to the Polish resistance about the horrors he witnessed. In 1943, he successfully escaped from Auschwitz, carrying invaluable information about the atrocities committed there. Even after his escape, this tireless patriot continued to fight against Nazi occupation. joining the famous Warsaw Uprising of 1944. Captured again, Peli survived until the end of the war in a prisoner of war camp. But our agent's thirst for adventure was not quenched. He accepted one last high-risk mission: to infiltrate Soviet-occupied Poland and report on the situation. Unfortunately, he was discovered in 1947, tried for espionage, and ultimately executed a year later. Witold Peli was a true hero whose courage and sacrifice for freedom went unrecognized until years later, when Poland posthumously awarded him the highest honors. Gavrilo Princip. Now, let's talk about war. Gavrilo Princip is indeed a controversial figure to include in a list of people who changed history's course. However, it's undeniable that his actions had catastrophic consequences that shook the entire world. Think for a moment about the most tragic and devastating butterfly effect. Yes, much more tragic than Ashton Kutcher being paralyzed. This is about a young man of only 19 years, born into extreme poverty in the Slavic territories of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. On June 28, 1914, Gavrilo Princip aimed his gun at the car carrying Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, firing two fatal shots that not only ended their lives, but also set off a chain of events that would forever alter humanity's course. That seemingly small act ignited the firestorm of World War I. The Austrian invasion of Serbia, followed by the German offensive in Belgium and France, led the Allies to declare global war just a month later, a conflict that claimed the lives of 18 million soldiers and civilians, leaving another 23 million wounded. Shortly after the First War, the second one followed, partly motivated by similar objectives. This is how a 19-year-old set off two world wars. However, Gavrilo was too young for the death penalty. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison and died of tuberculosis in 1918 without witnessing the full impact of his actions. Isn't it incredible how seemingly unknown individuals could have such a significant impact on human history? Don't miss out on more stories like these. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, give this video a big thumbs up, and leave your comments down below. Until next time.